Love is the most misunderstood word in the human language. We speak it easily, sing about it endlessly, chase it desperately. Yet few ever see what it truly is. Because what we call love is often a mirror of our hunger, not the reflection of our wholeness. And that is why temptation exists, to reveal what we mistake for love. Temptation is not evil. It is a teacher. It exposes the cracks in our devotion, the places where desire has not yet been purified by understanding. It comes dressed in beauty, in thrill, in warmth. Not to punish us, but to show us where we still believe the illusion that something outside us can complete us. In truth, temptation is the mirror through which love meets itself and decides whether it will rise higher or fall back into forgetfulness. Every soul that has ever longed, lusted, or betrayed knows this lesson intimately. It is written into our biology and carved into our memory as a species. We are wired to seek connection, but not all connections heal. Some bind, some burn, and a few, the rare ones, liberate. Marriage, in its highest meaning, is not the union of two bodies but the recognition of one consciousness through two forms. It is the vow of awareness, not merely fidelity to another person, but fidelity to truth within oneself. When we misunderstand this, marriage becomes a contract of fear. When we remember it, marriage becomes a vessel of awakening. Temptation enters when love forgets its center. When the relationship becomes a refuge for ego instead of a path for spirit, the soul begins to ache for freedom again. We think we are drawn to another person, but we are actually drawn toward a lost piece of ourselves. The face of temptation is the mask of our own unconscious longing. To understand this is to stop demonizing desire. Desire is sacred when seen clearly. It is the compass of creation, pointing toward what consciousness wants to experience next. But when desire becomes distorted by attachment, it turns into addiction. It tries to fill what only awareness can fulfill. That is why so many marriages fail, not because love disappears, but because love was never understood as consciousness meeting itself through another being. True love is not sentimental. It is intelligent, fierce, and clear. It knows when to hold and when to release, when to merge and when to stand apart. It does not bargain with truth. And yet, we spend our lives trying to make love comfortable instead of sacred. We call lust love, possession loyalty, dependency devotion, and then wonder why the feeling fades. But love, in its highest expression, never fades. It evolves. It transforms desire into reverence. It takes the fire of attraction and refines it into light. It burns away illusion until only the essence remains, the recognition of the divine within the other. To love truly is to see God behind human imperfection. That is what marriage was meant to be. Not a prison, not an obligation, but a spiritual crucible, a place where two souls mirror each other's unconsciousness until awareness arises through the friction. It is not always peaceful, but it is always purposeful, because every conflict in love is an invitation to wake up. Temptation becomes dangerous only when we run from that invitation, when we choose comfort over clarity, escape over evolution. We cheat not only on our partner, but on truth itself. And the punishment is built into the act, separation from our own integrity. No outer rule can save us from that inner consequence, because infidelity is not the act of touching another, it is the act of forgetting who you are. This forgetting happens in many ways, sometimes through lust, sometimes through resentment, sometimes through neglect. Each is a different disguise of the same unconscious state, the belief that love is something to get, not something to give. And as long as that belief governs us, we will be tempted endlessly, no matter how loyal we appear. To heal this, we must look deeper than morality. Morality restrains behavior. Awareness transforms being. You can follow every commandment and still live asleep. But when you truly see, when you feel the sacredness pulsing through another person, the idea of betrayal becomes unthinkable, not because it is forbidden, but because it would be like wounding your own soul. The battle between love and temptation is not fought in the world, it is fought in the mind. Every thought that separates becomes the seed of betrayal. Every judgment, every fantasy of escape, every silent resentment, they are small fractures through which the current of temptation flows. If left unseen, they grow. But if witnessed with awareness, they dissolve. Light reveals what darkness hides, so the task is not suppression, but seeing. To look directly at temptation, not to indulge it or fear it, but to understand it. To ask, what in me is being tempted? What am I seeking? What is missing? You will always find the same answer: connection to yourself. Every external temptation is the echo of an internal absence. And when you fill that absence with presence, temptation loses its power. This is how real marriage begins, when two beings learn to return to awareness again and again. They stop using each other as mirrors for blame, and start using each other as mirrors for awakening. They realize that every conflict is sacred training for love. That forgiveness is not weakness but remembrance of unity. That passion is not something to chase but something to refine. And that temptation is not the enemy of love, but its teacher, the one that keeps love honest. To resist temptation from fear is suppression. To resist it from understanding is transcendence. When you know what love truly is, you don't resist temptation. It simply no longer tempts you. You see it as a lower frequency of the same energy that, when purified, becomes devotion. The human journey is the transformation of instinct into insight. The flesh is not the enemy of spirit, it is its instrument. But when the instrument plays without the guidance of awareness, the song turns chaotic. To bring consciousness into desire is to let spirit conduct the body's music. Then even attraction becomes prayer. In this way, temptation can become sacred, because it reminds you of what you really want. Not pleasure, not novelty, not escape, but truth. It calls you back to the depth of love that cannot be lost or stolen. The love that does not depend on circumstances, appearances, or promises. The love that simply is. That love is not between two people, it is between God and His creation. Every relationship, every marriage, every attraction is only a symbol of that original union, the dance of the divine and the human within each of us. When you see this, you understand that your partner is not your possession, but your mirror. You stop trying to control love and start learning from it. You stop asking for happiness and start seeking understanding, and through understanding, you find peace. The world calls this enlightenment, but it is simply maturity of the soul, when love no longer depends on form to know itself. Temptation fades not because desire dies, but because consciousness learns to love without condition. In this light, even failure becomes holy. The affair, the mistake, the heartbreak, they all serve awakening when seen honestly, because every fall from grace is also a fall into truth. You begin to understand that guilt is not punishment, it is guidance. It shows you where love still fears itself, and when you forgive yourself deeply, the lesson becomes wisdom. Marriage then is not a ceremony but a state of consciousness. It is the union of the masculine and feminine within, of strength and surrender, reason and feeling, discipline and tenderness. When this inner marriage is complete, outer relationships become reflections of harmony instead of projections of lack. You no longer seek someone to complete you. You meet another who complements your completeness. And that is when love finally becomes what it was always meant to be. Not possession, not pleasure, not escape, but revelation. A reminder of God through the eyes of another. A bridge between the finite and the infinite. The body as temple, the heart as altar, the union as prayer. This is the sanctity of true marriage, not in perfection, but in awareness. Two souls walking side by side, falling, forgiving, rising again, learning that every trial, every temptation, every silence is a hidden passage to the divine. When love is seen this way, nothing is wasted. Even temptation becomes devotion in disguise. Every soul will meet temptation in some form. It may come as a glance, a memory, a fantasy, or a moment of weakness that feels stronger than reason. But beneath every temptation lies the same question whispered by God. Do you remember me, even here? The divine is not found only in purity. It hides in the shadows, waiting to be recognized. That is why temptation can feel so magnetic, because what you are really drawn to is the energy of life itself, misdirected through the lens of unconsciousness. You are not wrong for desiring. You are only asleep when you think the object of desire is the source of life. Temptation becomes sin only when awareness is absent. But when awareness is present, even desire becomes worship. When you feel the pull of temptation and meet it with consciousness, the energy transforms. What was lust becomes reverence. What was craving becomes creativity. The same force that drives you toward another body can elevate you toward God. Energy is never evil, only misused. It is the misuse that fragments, and the understanding that reunites. To understand this is to free yourself from guilt, because guilt without understanding is paralysis. It shames you into hiding instead of awakening. But guilt illuminated by awareness becomes repentance in its truest sense, not self-punishment, but self-recognition. It is the soul remembering what it had forgotten, that love cannot be possessed or polluted, only obscured. You may have fallen. You may have betrayed. You may have hurt someone you loved. And yet even that is not the end. Because divine love never withdraws. It waits. It waits for you to see that your mistake was not loving too much, but too little. Loving from need instead of being. The moment you see this, forgiveness begins. Not as an act of will, but as an inevitable awakening. Forgiveness is not something you do. It is something that happens when you realize there was never anything outside love to forgive. Still, humanity clings to punishment. We crave justice more than mercy because justice gives the ego power, while mercy dissolves it. But love is not interested in revenge. It seeks restoration. It knows that judgment only deepens separation. So when you forgive, you do not excuse the act. You heal the perception that created it. You remember that both the betrayer and the betrayed are two sides of one unconscious mind, playing out its longing for union. That is the hidden meaning of Christ's command, love your enemies. He wasn't asking for moral heroism, he was revealing metaphysical truth. Your enemy is your projection. The one who tempts you, betrays you, or wounds you is carrying a part of your unhealed self. To love them is to reclaim yourself. And when you do, temptation loses its host. Every marriage will face this test. The moment when passion wanes, resentment grows, and another possibility appears. This is the crossroads of all unions. One path leads to reaction, blame, avoidance, escape. The other leads to revelation, seeing the temptation not as a threat, but as a signal that love must evolve. Most people take the first path, trying to replace the person instead of transforming the relationship. But the same patterns will appear again and again until they are met with awareness. Because the purpose of love is not to make you comfortable, it is to make you conscious. To be truly married, in spirit, not just in ceremony, is to hold a mirror for the divine and say, I see you, even in your imperfection. It means standing in the fire of truth together until everything false burns away. It means recognizing that your partner is not responsible for your happiness, but they can reflect where you've hidden it from yourself. Such a union requires courage, because it will strip you bare. It will reveal every shadow you've avoided, every wound you've concealed. But in that stripping lies your liberation. The ego fears this. It calls it pain. But to the soul, it is purification. Just as gold must pass through fire to shine, so must love pass through temptation, doubt, and forgiveness to become pure. What remains after that process is not romantic love, It is divine love in human form. It no longer depends on feeling. It is a knowing. It does not fade with age or change with circumstance. It is the quiet certainty that the one before you is not your possession, but your reflection. And reflection is not always gentle. Sometimes love will use the sharp edges of conflict to awaken you. Sometimes it will let you break so you can see where you were fragile. Sometimes it will bring you to your knees so you can finally surrender the illusion of control. Do not resist these moments. They are sacred. They are the hidden rituals through which love matures. When two souls understand this, their union becomes luminous. They no longer argue to win, they speak to understand. They no longer use silence as punishment, they use it as prayer. They no longer fear temptation because they have learned to see it as shadow light. And through that seeing, the bond deepens, not by clinging, but by trust. Trust that truth itself is the foundation, not convenience or convention. The world celebrates attraction, but forgets devotion. Attraction is momentary, devotion is eternal. Attraction begins with the body, devotion begins with the soul. The body seeks excitement, the soul seeks depth. When devotion governs attraction, love becomes holy. When attraction governs devotion, love becomes fragile. That is why so many relationships shatter. They were built on electricity, not light. Real marriage is built on light, the kind of light that reveals rather than blinds. It does not dazzle, it illuminates. It allows you to see both the beauty and the brokenness of another without turning away. Because when you love someone from awareness, you stop trying to fix them. You begin to recognize the divine pattern unfolding through them, and your only role is to witness it with grace. This is not passive acceptance, it is active reverence. To revere someone is to hold space for their evolution without needing to control it. It is to believe in the light behind their shadow, even when they forget it themselves. That is what sacred partnership looks like. Two beings remembering God for each other when the other forgets. When one falls, the other becomes presence. When one is tempted, the other becomes clarity, not through judgment, but through love that sees through illusion. That kind of love cannot be taught by doctrine. It can only be lived through experience, through the mistakes, the heartbreaks, the humbling realizations that teach you what love is not. The failures of love are not proof that love doesn't work. They are how love learns to see. Because each heartbreak, if faced honestly, dissolves a layer of ego, and what is left behind is closer to truth. So do not curse the times you have fallen. Do not despise the seasons of confusion. They were sacred classrooms. They taught you discernment, patience, compassion. They refined your capacity to recognize real love when it finally appeared, the kind that asks for truth, not comfort. Temptation, when transmuted, becomes the guardian of love, because it reminds you of what you are not willing to lose: your integrity, your awareness, your peace. It keeps you honest about what you worship. And in a world that worships pleasure, honesty is a rare and holy thing. If you have ever faced temptation and chosen truth, even once, you have felt this holiness. That trembling moment when desire meets awareness and bows. When you feel the fire rise, and instead of fleeing it, you hold it in consciousness until it becomes light. That is what the saints called chastity, not repression, but mastery. The ability to let energy serve awareness instead of ego. And in that mastery, love becomes limitless. For love that has learned awareness cannot be broken. It may change form, but it cannot end. Even when two people part, the love remains as wisdom. Even when the body dies, the love continues as vibration. Because real love does not belong to time, it belongs to eternity. It is the remembrance that every meeting, every desire, every heartbreak was the soul's way of coming home to itself. That is, the mystery marriage was always meant to reveal. Not the binding of two egos, but the liberation of two souls. Not the pursuit of pleasure, but the unveiling of purpose. And through that unveiling, love becomes what it was in the beginning, the face of God, mirrored in human tenderness. Every great love story, whether it ends in joy or tragedy, is a reflection of one truth. Love's purpose is not to satisfy the self, but to reveal it. It is not designed to make life easier, but to make awareness deeper. We meet others not by accident, but by resonance. Each relationship a mirror, reflecting the exact lesson we are ready to face. And until we learn that lesson, life will keep sending us the same mirror with a different face. That is why the language of love and temptation feels eternal, because it is. It is the oldest dialogue in creation, the conversation between spirit and form, between truth and illusion. The heart is the meeting place where God speaks through longing. And longing, when purified, becomes prayer. In the beginning, love comes to you as desire. It pulls you outward, into the world of form, so that spirit can experience itself through relationship. But in the end, love returns inward as awareness, the recognition that everything you ever sought in another was the reflection of what you already are. The journey from desire to awareness is the true pilgrimage of the soul. It begins with the intoxication of the senses and ends with the stillness of knowing. Marriage, in its sacred sense, is the ritual embodiment of that journey. Two souls standing before one another and saying, "I am willing to remember the truth through you, no matter what it costs." It is not a vow of perfection but of presence, not a promise of happiness, but of awakening. Because awakening is the highest form of intimacy, it strips away illusion until only essence remains. And in that essence, temptation has no meaning, because temptation can only exist where there is division between what you want and what you know. When love and truth become one, that division disappears. Desire ceases to be a conflict. It becomes creation. You no longer chase love, you radiate it. You no longer fear loss, you see that nothing real can be lost. Most people never reach this understanding because they stop at the surface. They treat love as emotion, marriage as contract, faithfulness as restraint. But emotion fluctuates, contracts decay, and restraint without understanding breeds resentment. Only consciousness endures. Only awareness has the strength to carry love through the storms of imperfection. That is why true fidelity begins within. Before you can be loyal to another, you must be loyal to truth itself. Before you can trust someone else, you must trust the divine wisdom that placed them in your path. When this loyalty becomes the center of your life, you stop being afraid of temptation, because you see that nothing can take away what you truly are. Temptation does not end through avoidance. It ends through understanding. Avoidance creates tension. Understanding creates peace. When you see clearly, the power of illusion dissolves. You can walk through the garden of desire and touch nothing, not because you're resisting, but because you no longer crave what cannot nourish you. Your heart recognizes truth instinctively. It simply says, "This is not for me," and moves on in peace. That is what maturity feels like, serenity without suppression. And yet, there will still be moments of struggle, because you are human, and humanity is the soul's greatest art form. The divine did not send you here to be flawless. It sent you here to experience the transformation of weakness into wisdom. You were meant to feel desire so that you could discover discipline. You were meant to fall so that you could understand forgiveness. You were meant to suffer so that you could know compassion. In this way, every temptation you face is secretly grace wearing a disguise. Grace does not always appear as light. Sometimes it arrives as shadow. It will lead you into the very places you swore you would never go, only to reveal that even there you are loved. And when you finally see that love remains constant through both purity and sin, through both triumph and failure, you begin to live differently. You stop striving to be holy, and you start realizing that you already are. Holiness is not moral superiority, it is the capacity to see without judgment. It is the ability to look at temptation, at brokenness, at desire, and still recognize God hiding behind it all. Because everything you see is an expression of the same consciousness, the one seeking itself in infinite ways. The sinner and the saint are two phases of the same awakening. When you understand this, you stop condemning and start comprehending. You no longer need to label anything as evil or good. You simply witness the eternal process of transformation. That is the real meaning of redemption. Not the erasure of sin, but the recognition that nothing real was ever lost. The prodigal son was never truly separated from his father. He was only dreaming of distance. And so it is with us. We wander through temptations, illusions, and distractions, only to awaken one day and realize that we never left home. The light was with us all along. To love as awareness means to live from that remembrance. It means to treat every encounter as sacred, every human as divine, every challenge as initiation. It means to look at your partner, your child, your enemy, and see the same light wearing different faces. When you live this way, temptation becomes irrelevant, because what could possibly tempt wholeness? Wholeness desires only truth. This is the final liberation. When love no longer fluctuates with emotion, when faithfulness is not a rule but a natural expression of awareness, when forgiveness flows effortlessly because you understand there was never separation to begin with. It is the peace that passes understanding, not because it cannot be understood, but because it is the very source from which understanding arises. And when that peace fills a marriage, it becomes a temple. Two souls moving in rhythm with the divine, not because they agree on everything, but because they share the same center. Their union becomes a silent prayer, not shouted in words but lived through presence. They may argue, they may falter, they may fall, but each return to awareness is another vow renewed. Each moment of humility is another wedding ring placed upon the heart. This kind of love does not depend on how long it lasts, but on how awake it becomes. It could last a lifetime or a single afternoon. If awareness was there, it was eternal. Because the measure of love is not duration, but depth, and depth is found only in presence. So the next time you feel tempted, do not condemn yourself. Pause and look within. Ask, what am I really seeking? You will find that it is never the person, never the pleasure, never the escape. It is always the divine, calling you home through disguise. Smile at it, thank it. See it for what it is. And in that moment of seeing, you will feel something shift. The return of strength, the calm of clarity, the warmth of love, remembering itself. That is redemption in real time. You were never meant to live free of temptation, you were meant to live awake within it. Because only in awareness does love become invincible. It no longer fights desire, it transforms it. It no longer fears loss, it trusts the eternal. It no longer seeks completion, it knows it is whole. And that is the final marriage. The union of the human and the divine within you. When you stop asking love to fill you, and instead let love flow through you. When you stop trying to keep love, and instead become it. When you no longer say I love you, but simply live as I am love. That is when temptation becomes impossible, not because it is forbidden, but because there is nothing left to want. You have remembered the truth. Love was never something you found, it was what you've always been.